The rich man's son had never walked before his dad caught the maid in an amazing moment. There are times in our lives when we think we can handle anything. That if they work hard enough and trust, we can make every dream come true. In those early years, Destiny Williams, a young black woman who grew up in the rough streets of Brooklyn, who always thought that hard work could change the course of her family's life. It's fate she hoped to finish, get a good job, and buy her mom a small dog, rent a flat and send her younger brother to college. She was there every morning, running down narrow streets with their eyes fixed on the dark sky that was framed by old trees, brownstones. She told herself in silence that she would never give up. She picked through old magazines and tube stops and went to church for free classes. Every little win is a brick in the building blocks of a better future. Fate never goes in a straight line. On a bitterly cold winter night, everything broke. Destiny's dad, the man she looked up to most of all, had a deadly stroke, leaving her mother, and her brother to take care of themselves. A family that was barely getting by fell into a huge debt hole. Medicine for her mother, there were. Bills for her brother's school, and for utilities. Heights. Destiny put down her college books and jumped right into getting by. She worked at fast food places and cleaned wealthy people's houses. Families carried tables at fancy coffee shops, and even swept the stairs in falling apart tenements. Anything that will get you paid. Her hands got bigger and cracked from the dish soap. The weight of the midnight ships stooped her thin shoulders. She didn't complain, though, because she knew that every hard-earned dollar was her mother and brother depend on her. But as the stresses of life grew, I felt like I was stuck in a never-ending tornado. She sat by the small fire. Every night she looked out the window of her small flat at the stars over the city, looking for any sign of hope. When she was young, her dreams were big enough to light her soul, were now crushed by duty, hunger, and fear. And then, on a cold fall afternoon, just when she thought her faith was gone, hope came from the strangest place. It's the old neighbor, Mrs. Ruth. Destiny had helped on time, knocked on her door. "Destiny, dear," she said, "I know a rich man. A family on the Upper West Side wants a live-in housekeeper and babysitter. They pay well, but their kid is a bit of a handful. He hasn't talked or walked since his mother died last year, which is strange. If you need work, I can put in a good word," Destiny said. She never thought she took care of the rich, even though she had to carry the weight of her family's needs. But the rent was late, her mom said. Sick, and anything could happen to her brother's future, not having any other choice. With a hazy sense of fear in her heart, she nodded. But she was able to say thank you. Give Mrs. Ruth a smile. Destiny woke her up the next morning. She put on her threadbare coat, put her homemade lunch in her worn tote, and snuck onto the tube going north. The train moved back and forth, filled with tired commuters who were all lost in their own silent battle. Destiny pressed her face against the window and watched as the streets with graffiti were replaced by shiny glass, towers, business people in suits, and rows of clean cars. The Upper West Side pavement felt like a different world when she stepped on it. Wide, clean pavements are lined with amber-leafed trees. Shops where a dress could cost a family a month's wages buying food. In front of her rose a high-end apartment block with well-dressed doormen. It had a lobby that was so clean it sparkled. Destiny put more force on the tote's handle, pulled in a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "For my mother, I have to be strong for my brother," she said, as her soft footsteps echoed down the marble hallway. Big mahogany door with lots of detailed carvings. The front door to the Destiny. Williams moved into an apartment that would change her life in ways she could not even imagine. Once the heavy mahogany door was opened, a cold breeze came in from behind Destiny's steps. Unstable promise of a morning full of chaos. It was her that crossed the barrier. Along with nervousness, she was very aware of how small and out of place she felt in this situation, which made her heart race. Strange place. The crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling shone off of the clean marble floor. From the high ceiling, and each step sounds like a note in a fancy concerto. Looking up, she saw a grand entrance that was set up so perfectly. It felt like it was made just for her. Strange, the paintings were hung in perfect symmetry. A soft violet-colored silk runner spread out in front of an artificial fireplace that had a faint glow in one corner. The white orchids were sculpted and stood in spotless pots. Each bloom was perfect. An old grand piano was sitting next to a long spiral stairs. Lacquered surface that shined like glass. A silent warning that this is where fate might happen. It might as well be a tiny bit of dust. This Upper West Side neighborhood, which was only seen in looking through magazines or at her broken-down phone screen, which is now spread out in color that comes alive. High-end cars drive by outside the arched windows, across the street, and shoppers with nice shoes walking in and out with cool ease. Desire tightened her grip on her tote strap. Her palms were sweaty. For a moment, she saw herself in a mirror nearby. A slim black woman in a bare coat. Hair pulled back in a hurry, one brushstroke in the middle of everything. This work of extra art. She felt not only like she didn't belong at that moment, but also a deep fear of the unwritten rules that are built into every part of this house. She thought, if I break one of those vows, I owe more than 3 months' rent. Her throat was getting dry. Before her fear could get worse, a warm and calm voice spoke up. From down the hall, someone called, "Is it true that you are Destiny?" The owner was Mrs. Lorraine Blake, was a short, silver-haired woman with steely, gay blue eyes that spoke of both wisdom and of authority. She moved with a leather-bound book in her hand and a simple, elegant outfit on, with the calm confidence of someone who is used to planning her whole life. But her happiness at fate felt smoother than all the other things in the house. "Come on in," she told him. We were waiting for you. Don't worry, you'll be fine once you get settled in." Destiny's shaking got a little better when she looked into those eyes. Still, her steps stayed cautious as she moved from one thing to another, as if she didn't want to upset an unsaid piece. She was led down the hall by Mrs. Blake. "This apartment was made by Matthew, my son. He's crazy about being perfect, and you'll see soon enough." The words came down like a soft threat. Destiny was afraid to ask more, but store them in her mind. As they entered the living room, a cold stillness hit them like a bolt from the blue. From the slate-gray walls and into every priceless object inside, the huge area, I felt empty. There was no sign of real life at all, because everything was so well organized. There are no family pictures, toys, notes, or coats that are strewn around or written quickly. The chandelier's soft gold light filled the room like honey, but it was missing something. Warmth is what every house needs most. What made her heart race wasn't just the it was like this place was made of silk, but she had more money than she could ever dream of. The tomb showed perfection while hiding all signs of closeness. She thought she could hear her own beating in the huge room like a hollow drum. "Don't worry if Matthew seems distant," Mrs. Blake said in a low voice. "The leather couch by the window, he's lost a lot, but I believe he'll learn one day what really counts, even if he's not perfect." Destiny nodded. She felt a little better and more worried about who the real master of this realm was. He wasn't just a strong, successful man. His pain turned his soul into ice. One look, or one person's word could make them seem unimportant. In the shadows by the stairs, Matthew Blake stood still and watched with pain in his mind. Was tall, put together gray suit perfectly, ash-brown hair slicked back, lips pressed into a hard line. His presence alone gave them power. No words were needed. The room seemed to hold its breath around him. He looked at his future, filled with a mix of doubt and hot desire, as if ready to pounce on any mistake. But behind those cold eyes was a deep tiredness and a wound that no one had seen. Matthew didn't see anything in this house as important, not even the staff, his control plan, and nothing else. Just as Destiny felt trapped between these two worlds, the dead silence of this refuge and her broken dream was another door waiting to be opened. And the real test was just starting. That's when Destiny, as if she hadn't already stopped breathing in the suffocating luxury, a person stepped down the stairs. Clear and quiet, but the whole living room seemed to stop for a moment. Matthew Blake stood tall and was dressed in a dark gray suit that fit him perfectly. He wore a suit, slicked back his light brown hair, and his face was as sharply chiseled as limestone. He seemed to be in charge of everything. As he put his hand in his pocket and looked over at Fate with a frosty gaze, there was barely any press of his lips, all of it making an imaginary line that she didn't dare cross. The most scary thing about Matthew, though, was his eyes. They were a steely gray-blue color. His eyes were bright, but had sharp edges. They looked over her like a thin blade and made a cold cut under the skin. There were wounds behind that good-looking exterior. No one had touched her, and whenever those eyes were on Fate, she felt ashamed. There is doubt and a warning, like a stain on this spotlessly clean house. Mrs. Lorraine smiled and introduced her, but Matthew just shook his head. He gave her a nice smile but didn't shake her hand. He also didn't ask her any questions. Looked her over from head to toe and decided she was right for this unsuitable place. "Since your mother picked you, it must be okay," he said in a level voice that was almost emotionless. "Don't make things too hard for yourself." Every word in Matthew sounded like a greeting and a danger to her being here. Destiny put her in a square, shoulders, and wouldn't look down. She looked Matthew in the eyes for a long time, second. Long enough to see both how cold he was and the deep scar that lay beneath. "Someone who used to love too much is now using power and rules to protect his," she said. "Hello, Mr. Blake. My name is Destiny," in a small, quiet voice. "I'll try my best." Matthew didn't answer. He quickly called his mother too. Asked about plans and safety rules, then ran down the hall and into his study. The door shut with a loud click that echoed through the room like a wall that couldn't be broken through. Afterward, she felt heavy. Destiny knew that Matthew only saw her as a replacement, made only useful for keeping things clean and in order. Here, he didn't trust her and didn't care where she was from or what her hopes and fears were. For him, Fate was everything. One of those things she could throw away whenever she wanted. A mix of anger and hurt. Destiny felt a rush of emotion as she thought about what her father had said. "Walk with confidence, no matter what other people think of you. No one can take away your worth. They won't go away unless you let them." She promised herself she wouldn't cry or let herself be pushed down, even in this cold house. But Destiny's presence, the difference between a young black woman from Brooklyn and Matthew's world stirred up the calm waters here after a long time of being still. Every time she moved, cleaned, cooked, or just said something nice, Matthew felt an odd mismatch with Mrs. Lorraine, as if a single brushstroke of color had he was annoyed that something had messed up his carefully controlled grayscale painting. He couldn't take his eyes off of her. Her calm, hopeful eyes made him both suspicious and confused. Could someone like Destiny dare to come into his world, which was his normal? Putting up walls and shoving everyone away, especially those who were smart enough to see that beneath his proud exterior, behind the mask, was a weak and hurt soul. At that moment, a silent battle started. Destiny's brave fight to keep her family alive against Matthew's cold. Fear of losing lead to harsh defenses. No one could have known at the time that this meeting that seemed normal would set off the chaos that would change both of their lives forever. The heavy door to Samuel's room slowly opened, letting Destiny's weight fall further, meeting with Matthew in a new place. There was no aura of power here. There was dead quiet. Destiny stepped in, her hand shaking slightly, taking in the room's soft colors and the way everything was neatly put away and skillfully, like in a high-end magazine spread. The big room was filled with natural light. A big window with a view of the park lets in a lot of light. A light breeze blew the curtains around. Along one wall, shelves held dozens of stuffed animals, toy cars, and building blocks that have never been used or touched any real mess from youth. There was a low bookcase in one corner, filled with English and French fairy tales. Next to it was a watercolor easel. There was still a full box of crayons out in the playground. While kids played with their toys, there was not a single sound. Of youth, there were no sounds of running feet or even the faint rustling of crushed paper. It felt like time had stopped because the air was thick, cold, and cloudy. On the light gray shag floor, the loneliness that lived in every shadow was frozen. Samuel, 4 years old, was curled up by the window. His fine white hair was a mess. His light skin stood out against the blue jumper that was too big on him, which hung loosely around his small frame. His eyes were fixed on something far away, and he held a worn-out rabbit in his arms. Toy with threadbare ears, his lone tied. To the real world, Destiny stopped at the doorway, and the sight made her heart race. She could feel the child's loneliness, his pain that he couldn't say, and that he seemed to be frozen in fear, with no movement or blinking. Terrified, his spirit worn out by a pain no child should have to go through, Mrs. Lorraine walked up to Destiny softly and put a soft hand on her shoulder. Her voice was soft, and he is sad and hasn't spoken or walked since his mother died. Specialists, doctors and counselors haven't been able to help. Samuel has made a no one can get through the imaginary wall that Destiny felt as a child. Nights when her dad wasn't home, when her mom was sick, and the terror of being left alone and having no one hear her cries. She looked at Samuel and saw behind him. Those cloudy eyes showed a small soul stuck between a world of wealth and complete despair, aloneness. Fate knelt next to him gently, keeping a proper distance from she didn't say anything. Instead, she put her bag on the pickup an old picture book of fairy tales from the floor and start turning the worn-out pages. She read the stories her mother had told her in a low, calming voice, letting the words calm Samuel down like a soft lullaby. He didn't look at her, and his body didn't move. He stayed stiff and tightened his grip on the rabbit, but Destiny didn't give up. She stayed for a long time, her eyes fixed on Samuel. He was the only thing that made her feel warm. Could in this room that looks like it belongs in a fairy tale, but is very cold. Matthew did not say anything as he watched. His face was heavier than normal. He was angry and hopeless at the same time as he watched Destiny and Samuel. There was a stirring of two souls from different places, each trapped by their own invisible walls. Couldn't put his finger on what was bothering him, and the silence seemed impossible to break. Destiny knew that this quiet wasn't emptiness. It was a voice that wasn't being heard, a cry for help, a weak spirit longing for a gentle touch. In her heart, she knew how painful that was, because she had been a kid that no one heard. No one asked about her or reached out to her. That's when Destiny made her promise. To herself, she promised herself that she would find a way to bring Samuel back to life, no matter how long it took. To connect with just one blink, a small smile, or the softest most her hand, which made me feel better. From the moment Destiny stepped out, she knew that the real fight was about to start in Samuel's quiet room, and that the biggest problem she faced wasn't being alone as a scared kid, but the walls that adults had put up around her. Walls that Matthew Blake had built with more tenacity than anyone else. Every morning before dawn, Destiny rose. She walked slowly through the house, like a shadow. She'll polish every walnut tabletop, dust every bookshelf, and buff every surface. Carefully move the plush toys around in every corner of the drawers, looked over the curtains and bed sheets, and even squished the tablecloths until each the fold lay flat. Whenever she heard Matthew's steps going down the stairs, the air in the house felt colder and heavier, like he was taking away the warmth from it. The walls. Matthew never said good morning. Instead, he just watched her, with a look that is sometimes as cold as winter wind, and sometimes a quick look that concealed a very close examination. A single particle of dust, or a droplet of liquid on a knife left on the kitchen counter, or a spoon that isn't straight, could tell him to cut something. It's not dry in the dishwasher. How long did you leave that floor cleaner on the wood? Time, be more careful. Samuel's food needs smaller cuts. Just don't change the menu without permission. Each small word added up to a weight that Destiny couldn't see, keeping her on high alert all the time because she never knew when one mistake could cost her her job. Even being close to Samuel was hard. Whenever Destiny tried to sit next to him, he either moved farther away or screamed. His own world or Matthew would show up out of the blue, eyes narrowed with doubt and frustration that he didn't even see in himself. Matthew would sometimes speak up if she went on too long telling a story or singing him a song in too low a voice. Short frown. Leave him alone. Don't make things more difficult. Let the doctors handle it. Take care of it. Matthew needed to be in charge in more places than just the kitchen. Samuel's daily task was to clean, so he would walk around the house and check every she had to explain why she picked one brand of soap over another in every cupboard and trash can. Not a day went by without her answer. Destiny made her feel like she was being watched and judged, like an outsider holding on to land that was never hers. She was so tired and embarrassed that she was about to pack up and leave in the middle of the night, after she made Samuel cry during a simple story time and he told her off for it. The unfair blame hurt, and she wondered if she was strong enough to handle this hard world. When things were really bad, Destiny went to the tiny Maid's room at the end of the hall and called home. The line would break when Mom's weak but loving voice said, "My daughter, your father is dead. For sure. Your brother and I will be there for you. I know it's hard, but our family will. You can stay alive if you don't give up." And her little brother's firm promise, "Fate. As long as you stay, I'll work hard at school. One day, we'll be in a better place." Just those few words gave her fire and kept it going. He was cold, but she knew that if she could just hold on, if she wouldn't let it happen, put out her hope, because things could still change. But every day brought new problems. Matthew's coldness wasn't just a way of acting. It was a wall he built around himself because of his own hurts and losses. In every sigh he thought no one heard, and every tight line around his eyes when he thought he was sure she didn't hear him. But she heard him on the phone in his study one time. His voice was rough as he talked. "Samuel, no, my kid doesn't need friends. Follow the treatment plan and don't ask." Again he talked about his mother. His voice was shaking, and it was a mix of anger, and he seemed cold. But his hopeless fear showed the terror that was hiding beneath it. Fate then showed him that he had lost someone important and had not protected them. That her being there, a poor black girl from Brooklyn, was the most unexpected. Matthew's highly organized world made him uneasy and compelled him to do something about it. To watch her closely and test her, hoping she'd quit on her own so he could shut down his secret domain for good. But Destiny, she decided to stay because she was quiet, determined. Her relationship with Samuel was growing, and she loved the family she had left behind. She had to deal with the hot days and Matthew's cold eyes all the time because, deep down, she thought that even the strongest walls could be broken down. In the loft, the days blended together. It was like time had stopped, and every sound, movement, and breath seemed to slow down, under the weight of the pressure that fate felt so strongly but couldn't see, aside from the never-ending chores. She felt suffocated by a rising fear in her heart. The fear that she would never really get through to Samuel. After only a few tries, Destiny learnt something that made her heart hurt. Samuel was afraid of being touched. If someone got too close, especially an adult, he would pull in and clutch. He held on so tight to his old bunny toy, eyes wide as if he were ready for something terrible. He pushed away hugs and shook when someone put their hand on his shoulder. Even jerked back when Destiny tried to move a book close to him, tried singing him a lullaby, a soft tune that her mother had used to calm her down. Samuel just stared at her blankly. Sudden squeezed his rabbit, who had a pale face and was breathing quickly. He let out a single tear, and Destiny was silent. She knew what he meant. Samuel didn't dislike her. He was just scared. He was scared of anything that had to do with adults, and loved being close to her. Deserves, but has never had. As soon as Matthew heard Samuel's room's weak song, he went to check it out. He showed up with a firm face, as if he had just realized he had made a big mistake. "Ask yourself what you're doing. No one here needs lullabies. Don't change or comfort anyone. I only wanted to make Samuel feel better. Do what the doctor tells you, and don't let your feelings get in the way." What he saw here made my blood run cold, and I could feel his anger. Matthew, his need for control wasn't just a habit. It was his only defense, the armor he'd worn, built on losses that were never said. Any small change scared him. The fragile world he had made for himself and his son. After that, Destiny's every move was closely watched. She could only read a few short stories. Read stories. Let Samuel play play with only the toys that Matthew had given his okay, and stay in his room only during very specific times. If anyone else came in, she had to lock the door. To leave right away. Even making meals was limited by a strict menu. No room for imagination, not even a star-shaped apple slice. But it wasn't the rules that were the worst. It was seeing Matthew scare Samuel so badly that he started to shake. Saturday afternoon, Samuel spilt orange juice on the rug by chance. It was a small mistake, but Matthew got angry. "Samuel, how many times have I told you to be careful, this room isn't for ruining." The boy became scared and hunched over. His lips were shaking. He put his hands over his head like he was getting ready for a storm. She moved forward to protect him, but Matthew's glare stopped her in her tracks. "Step back. We don't need any heroes right now." Samuel's soft tears filled the room. Sound, but his throat was tight. Destiny felt useless as she watched the man. The thing that the boy was most afraid of became someone who seemed to be immune to pain. She turned away, tears in her eyes, because she knew the words she was about to say would not change anything. That night, Destiny sat by the window in her small room at the end of the hall and stared into the dark. No longer strong, she cried so hard on her pillow that it was wet with tears. She felt sick to her stomach from seeing Samuel so scared. She wondered if not only did Samuel need to be saved, but Matthew, who was stuck, did too. She really had. The strength to see this through, in the depths of his own mind, where being in charge only broke things down even more. Then, in the back of her mind, she heard her father's voice whispering, "Sometimes you have to step through fear to see the light. Only you can save yourself," Destiny said as she wiped her tears away. She made a quiet promise that she would start over tomorrow and not give up. If no one stayed by her side, she would. Who would lead Samuel out of this darkness? Destiny woke up early the next morning as her eyes were still puffy from crying, but her face was firm and resolved. She didn't give up. She slipped through the quiet hallway. New York City was covered in a thick gray fog as rain hit the windows. Sound seemed muffled inside the apartment, and the air was thick with sounds that didn't have names. Destiny carried a heavy load, but inside there was a small light. An unspoken stubbornness. No amount of pain or tears could put out the flame. She thought of Samuel's sad face and the way he closed his eyes when adults yelled at him. Looked like the child she used to be, the one who waited for someone brave enough to stay and really care. As usual, Destiny went into Samuel's room in the morning after she was done with her work. He held on tight to his old rabbit and sat by the window, his eyes fixed on the raindrops running down the glass. In the past, Matthew's constant guards, rules, and threats had made her hesitant. But today, under the "it rained outside" fate became clear. If no one dared to break this cycle, Samuel would be stuck in his cold cage forever. She slowly pulled out a small, bright green she had been saving money to buy a silly dinosaur hand puppet at a junk market. In her coat pocket, keeping a safe distance, she said, "Hey there, are you ready for a dinosaur story today?" Lucky for him, Samuel didn't turn around, kept going. She began to talk in a silly voice, and the doll started to move, laugh and roar in a silly way until the dinosaur tripped and fell down on a banana peel and writhed in pain as it lay on the rug. She made a funny whimper and said, "Oh no." Dinosaur slip. Ouch. Then when the dinosaur finally got to its feet, it grimaced and shuffled over to the bunny Samuel was holding. Then it took place, soft as light as a breeze, coming in through a door that is cracked as small as a raindrop, falling quietly. Samuel laughed very quietly, first for a short time, then for a genuinely giggle a little. His eyes got bigger, and a tiny bit of happiness lit up. He looked at them, but his lips were pressed together, as if he was afraid to cross an invisible line. It was all Destiny could do to hold her breath and give a soft smile. She kept going. The puppet's actions, this time making a big splash by falling into the rabbit's lap, they all laughed together. Samuel tried to cover his mouth, but he couldn't. Do not show that his shoulders are shaking a little. He felt joy, even if it was only for a short time. With that laugh, Destiny knew she had broken through his heart's toughest shell. What Destiny didn't know was Matthew Blake had been standing outside the door in the dark hallway for a while, without saying anything. Putting weight on, he looked through the small hole in the wall, which was stiff. That little laugh echoed. Sounds in the house had not been that far away or loud in over a year. For the first time in a long time, Matthew felt lost. Bewilderment mixed with doubt, fear, and joy in equal amounts. He was afraid to go inside, partly out of pride and partly out of fear. Couldn't believe that a maid who he had always looked down on could do something so simple to touch his son's heart. Deep inside, a lot of confusing questions came up. Was he wrong the whole time? Were his WHR tight rules and regulations the things that are pushing Samuel farther away? Matthew turned and walked away quietly, holding those mixed feelings. With him, he didn't know whether to be mad, happy, or ashamed. His long-kept, short, innocent laugh was enough to show how weak and useless she was. If not for fate, there was hope in that moment. In the suffocating darkness of the penthouse, a thin line of light had finally broken through. It was weak but not easy to extinguish. Find out. Even though she didn't expect one, she knew this. As long as she don't give up. As long as people were laughing, there was a chance to free Samuel from his lonely cage. It felt like days were frozen in time in the apartment. Each and every move, every sound and breath seemed to slow down because of how heavy fate felt. Sharply, the suffocation was caused by both the never-ending work and a growing fear. She felt in her heart that she might never really reach Samuel. After just a few tries, Destiny learned something that made her heart hurt. Samuel was scared of everything. Get in touch. If an adult got too close, he would pull in and hold on to his ragged bunny so tightly, eyes wide as if they were ready for something bad to happen. Happen? People who touched his shoulder, even if it was just a light touch, made him shaky. Instinctively moved away when fate tried to bring a book close. The first time she tried to sing him a bedtime song, her mother would play her a soft song to calm her down. Samuel just stared. All of a sudden squeezed his rabbit, his face pale and his breath rough. He shed a single tear. It was the end of Destiny. It was clear to her. Samuel didn't dislike her. He was scared of how close they were. Every child should have. Matthew came out as soon as he heard her singing coming from Samuel's room. Her face turned darker as if she had done something very bad. What do you have planned? Not anyone needs lullabies over here. Not try to make him feel better or change anything. I only meant to make Samuel feel better. Just do what the doctor tells you. Don't think about how this makes you feel. His eyes were cold and as sharp as a knife, with a lot of frustrated anger. For Matthew, being in charge wasn't just a habit. It was his only defense, the armor he'd made around his pain that he didn't say. But to him, any small change could upset the fragile world he had built for his son and for himself. From then on, Destiny could not do anything. She could only read short stories were okay, Samuel could only play with toys, and Matthew had already read them. It'd only be in his room during the times given. If someone else came in, she had to leave right away. Even meal times had to follow a rigid plan. You can't be creative at all, not even when you cut an apple into a star shape. But the rules might not have been the worst blow. In the afternoon, she watched Matthew scared Samuel so much that he shook. Samuel spilt one weekend by chance. The rug has orange juice on it. Small mistake. But Matthew stomped in with his eyes burning, snapping of the tongue. Samuel, I've told you many times to be careful. This room is not for making a mess. The boy became scared and hid himself. His lips were shaking, and his hands were over his head like he was hiding from a storm. Its fate ran forward to protect him, but Matthew's glare stopped her in her tracks. Take a step back. There's no need for heroes here. Samuel's screams filled the room with silence. Destiny felt powerless as she watched this man who seemed unbeatable at first, become the thing his son fears the most. She had tears in her eyes, but I turned away and fought back the words that wouldn't change anything. That night, in her Destiny sat by the window at the end of the hall in a small room and stared into the darkness. Her pillow was wet with tears because she was no longer strong. Anger, helplessness, and sadness were nagging at her chest. She wasn't sure if she had the strength to finish this, since it not only Samuel needed to be saved, but also Matthew, who was lost in his own darkness. Prison, where being in charge made the wounds worse. However, from deep in her mind came it, was her dad's voice. Sometimes light only shows up when you do not be afraid to move through fear. You are the only one who can save you. She wiped her tears away and made a promise. She wouldn't give up. Tomorrow she would start over. Give up. Because Samuel would be alone if no one stayed by his side. This darkness? As Destiny's door shut behind her, she was still crying. Cheeks. It got even heavier in the loft. There was a tense silence in every room that feels like the start of the longest night. Lucky Destiny felt all of her hard-won the work disappears. In an instant, every weak dream was dashed by a harsh, cold storm. But in that quiet place, Mrs. Lorraine would, after having watched in silence up until now, she decided she could no longer stand it. She strode. Matthew was alone by the window in his office, and his shoulders were shaking from anger or exhaustion. She wasn't able to tell me. She didn't hold back or try to comfort him in a meaningless way. Matthew, you think that managing everything is keeping Samuel safe, but it's really just a way for you to punish yourself, making it harder for your son to find the love he needs. Matthew turned around, his eyes rimmed with red. The first real sign of pain and confusion behind that cold exterior. You don't get it. Something what will happen to Samuel? If I lose him like I lost Anna, I won't be able to live. Mrs. Lorraine moved closer and put a soft but strong hand on his shoulder. Because you're afraid, you don't know your own kid anymore. Samuel needs a dad who, not a guardian who dares to love. There are times when the only way to get better is to be honest. You're weak. The last bit of wall Matthew had built around himself was broken by what she said. He put down his head and his legs were shaking. He hadn't felt lost because of his pride. Lied broken. At that weak point, Matthew realized he had not only Destiny was the only person brave enough to go into Samuel's world, but she was hurt. Become the thing that makes his son scared and alone. That night, while Destiny sat still and there was a soft knock on her door, Matthew showed up, no longer keeping his usual stiff cool. He walked in and stood still for a long moment before they spoke, not with orders, but with a plea for help. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I was scared. I didn't know how to help Samuel stay alive. I can't stand to lose anyone else. I thought I had everything under control, would keep him safe, but I made things worse instead. Lucky Destiny was shocked. There was a father behind that cold, strict appearance. It broke him to feel powerless and to remember the mistakes he had made. Now his eyes held feeling empty, helpless, and scared to death. Destiny sat next to him quietly, hands on his hips, held together. She told him of her own youth, of her father's sudden, her mother and brother having a hard time in their old broken-down flat, of nights spent wide awake in pain and fear, because they knew that one bad event could ruin everything. I used to think that if I was in charge of everything and never let go, I was weak, but I could hold on to what I loved. But I found out that only a calm being brave enough to talk about our fears can help us get over the loss we fear. Destiny's simple, honest words, which didn't point the finger, were like a balm to Matthew's long-hidden wounds. Two people from different worlds found each other. They were both hurting the same way. Being afraid of losing family and having to deal with how you feel, they have to deal with it by themselves. After that night, there was a quiet change. Took over the loft. Matthew saw Destiny in a whole new way. He looked for her for the first time. Samuel's schedule, and she listened. To her gentle meal ideas, routines, and even the light exercises he used to tell them not to do. The rough, instead of orders and wary looks, there was guarded but real trust. And Destiny felt like she had a real partner in the fight to bring Samuel back into the light for the first time. Together, they got together and made plans for the next few days. The little games, the easy workouts, the new books to read, and going to bed, we have stories to tell. These small steps were the most important start of all of them. The beginning of a mending path that neither of them had to stand on their own, After that night of crying and being honest, there was a quiet change in the air. The top floor, tired looks, dry orders, and there was an imaginary wall between them all, inside the same building. Instead of them came simple, small signs of life again. Even more important, Matthew's first take the lead.
Matthew
Made the coffee the next morning and set down a cup. By destiny, as a thank you that wasn't said, he didn't stay locked up in his office, like always. Instead, he went up to Samuel and Destiny and asked how Samuel's morning was, and what he liked to eat and read, and where he had been. Even though awkward, he had looked at Destiny with a softer gaze than she had ever seen him. Back then, after that, fate stopped being so careful with every choice. She confidently planned tasks for Samuel, and to her surprise, Matthew jumped in and helped her put together Legos with his son in the living room. Another time, he was fumbling with cutting veggies in the kitchen and laughed so hard that he turned red about how to make big slices of carrots. In the afternoon, when the sun was soft, Samuel was taken out by Matthew and put on the balcony. They sat on the lounge bench and pointed out birds, hopping on the balcony, calling the clouds by their names, and telling tales about the bright red bus that went by on the street below. The house was filled with soft laughs for the first time in months, and normal chatter was the only sound a real family has. Fate became the center of every that link. It wasn't just the maid anymore. She slowly earned Matthew's real love. Thank you. He asked her what she thought about new dishes, and listened when she said light Samuel did exercises and found things outside. She looked at Destiny with Mrs. Lorraine as well, thanks and pride, knowing in the background that fate had not only saved Samuel, but it made Matthew feel something too. Samuel's return to life happened slowly, but without a doubt like a miracle. He started to say the first sounds of words. Few word sounds like ma, da, cake, and sis filled the house with happiness. Tomorrow, it took a lot of courage for Samuel to hold on to a chair and stand up. He then waved Destiny over with a strong voice. Whenever Samuel gave his dad a smile or sat down next to Destiny to listen to a story, Matthew's eyes hurt. He saw that lying wasn't the way to real happiness. In complete charge, but in those little times, every warm hug and true trust, Samuel gave him a look that was about fate in their home. In just a few weeks, the loft, which used to be cold, was surprisingly warm now. Mornings smelt like toast, and the living room was full of there were Lego blocks and colored pencils on the patio, which sparkled in the afternoon sun as a child laughed.
out.
Destiny no longer felt like she didn't belong here. She had become its heart. A heart that linked everyone, the bearer of hope, inspiration, and new, to live in a house that used to feel like a velvet grave. After that, Matthew not only thanked her, but he also turned to admire her. He learned how to hear him out and share his deepest ideas with fate. He knew that the trip to heal and bring Samuel back was important. When they were brave enough to trust and put aside their fear and pride, their family really started. And put out your hands to each other. It looked like the signs of hope, and the penthouse had been warmed for a long time by a child's laughing. But when the wet season came back, New York woke up. Its cold gray covering is back, just like before. Late that night, thunder shook. The IT rained hard outside, and it looked like everything would be washed away. A fresh source of warmth under the Blake roof. Suddenly, the whole flat fell. The lights went out, leaving the room completely dark. It shook with thunder and wind howled through. Samuel shook and started to cry in the strange darkness because of the cracks. After taking him in her arms, Destiny gently reassured him while Matthew looked for a torch. In the kitchen drawer, many years ago, Mrs. Lorraine lit some old candles and they squished together in the soft light of the sun. There, in that place, with the wind, all the lines of rank, past, hurts, power, and suspicion are screaming outside. Went away, leaving only the rare closeness of people who used to be strangers. Once his tears stopped, little Samuel curled up. In Destiny's lap, his hiccuping sobs that turned into sleep. For a while, Matthew just sat there next to them. He had been tired for a long time, and his gray eyes showed it. He had been fighting inner storms for too long. The candle, even though the light brought out the harsh lines on his face, it couldn't hide the doubt in those strong blue eyes, but very weak. As if by fate, on that wet night, Matthew finally said out loud the things he had always been afraid to say. Someone else. I used to think I was the toughest person in the world. I was proud of our happy family, everything I worked for, until that terrible night. Anna, my wife, was gone in an instant. Everything fell apart. It's still loud for me. Glass, smelled the ambulance siren's blood ring. I had no power. As I stood there, helpless, I watched the person I loved most leave me for good, he whispered. What he was saying was furious after the funeral, guilt. Samuel, he wasn't old enough to understand. But every time he looked at me, in my mother's eyes, all I saw was how bad I was. I was really scared. Only knew how to, we thought, that rules and control would keep us safe. I only made things, though, even worse. Destiny was shocked when he told her how much he hurt. In the tea light flashing, she saw someone she barely knew behind the thick mask in the light. A man who couldn't remember his name hurt, a father who feels powerless and is in pain. She took his hand slowly and gave it a s, and then softly told her own story of nights spent in a small. It was dark in the flat, it was raining, and she could hear her mother coughing. Day and night she was afraid she would lose her family and her only friend, home. I grew up poor and scared that I would lose my mother, my only parent, brother, or the only roof I had. I felt like I had to freeze my feelings just to stay alive. It's only when we're brave enough to let our weak sides show that we can be strong. In pain before we get the good things we deserve. Matthew's scars were held together by her simple, heartfelt words. Their eyes, they met across the candlelight, and the walls came down to broken hearts, seeing that they had finally found a safe place to rest and someone who truly knew how heavy things were for them they loved. The rain got lighter outside. Windows were no longer being hit by the wind. Inside the flat, that sudden closeness turned into a promise that was never spoken. They wouldn't let life's storms destroy the trust they had built, and they wouldn't run away from this. People who were so tired rarely got a second chance from fate. When it was stormy, when morning came, the apartment seemed to come to life, with the first rays of light. When Destiny woke up, Samuel was still sleeping soundly next to her, and Matthew was sitting at the breakfast table, with sad eyes that are set deep. Signs of yet another sleepless night. The worn-out had gone away and been replaced by a fierce determination, as if he had just come out of a long sleep. An inner fight. Destiny thought about it for a while after breakfast and then proposed it. She had been caring for a choice that could change Samuel's life forever. I've read that Seattle has a unique rehab center. Experts there use a method that uses music, animal interaction, and movement therapy all at the same time for kids who have been through bad things like Samuel's. I think that if he could be in a new place, spend time with animals, and listen to music made by nature, it's possible. Matthew just listened for a long time, his eyes moving to the window, where the light from the morning came in. In the past, he would have flatly turned down such a suggestion, saying that nothing would change. Ideas. Now he knew what he had to do to save his son for good. He had to trust himself to get over his fear of failing. His nod was slow, and finally felt the steady beating of a determined father as he reached for Destiny's hand. Let's try. We'll do everything together, no matter what happens. Within a week of getting ready, the three of them, along with Mrs. Lorraine, get ready to go. Samuel was still quiet on the plane, but his eyes were bright. The old bunny was still alive, and his little hand wasn't holding on to it so tightly anymore. Instead, he sometimes lightly touched Destiny's or Matthew's finger, as if making a promise in your head. The treatment center was in a forest of tall pines, forests outside of the city where the skies are bright and birds are singing. Samuel met friendly golden retrievers, was shown around music rooms, and did gentle movements with they played. With balls and swings, and listened to soft guitar music in the treatment room. Destiny and Matthew took turns being by his side every day, and they cheered for every little step forward, or raised a look, a small smile, and a bigger sigh. Samuel stayed on the first day, pulled back, letting only the most necessary touch happen. Still, the warm, the calm environment, the happy dogs, and the soothing morning music helped his wounds get better over time. After a few patients, Samuel shocked everyone by sitting up and picking up a ball on his own, without any help on the mat. Matthew was moved to tears as he watched. He was afraid that if he looked away, the happiness would go away, so he didn't blink. Destiny put her arm around his shoulders and told him, "You killed someone but saved your son Matthew. Brave to trust and let go." By the 10th session, in a beautiful Seattle afternoon light, Samuel jumped up, stumbled a few steps, and turned to face Destiny. Matthew, with eyes that sparkled, then in a voice that filled the room with shaking, he said in a whisper, "Mommy." That's when Destiny and Matthew both heard it. Shed tears, tears of joy, faith. And the prize for all their quiet, first Samuel ran into Destiny's arms. Then he clung to Matthew and yelled, over and over, "Mommy, Daddy." The cry held years of pain, anger, and fear, and shame whirred away. Samuel had found his voice, and they've also been given a fresh start. The chance to be real parents, to start over, and to live with love and feeling in an honest way. The first mommy Samuel had for Destiny was the amazing proof of sticking with something, caring, and never giving up hope. For Matthew, it was freedom, the most forgiveness for past wrongs, and though it was a miracle that he could let go of everything and accept life's biggest gift. At that very moment, the treatment center stopped being a faraway place of business. It was once the home of 3 people. Lost and hurt, they are now born again together. As soon as Samuel called Mommy, and the 3 of them were never the same after going to that rehab center in Seattle. Well known, every look, every breath, and every hand squeeze on the flight brought life. Go back to New York. Destiny could feel a different Samuel, one who wasn't afraid to hide in the dark, but brave enough to laugh, talk, walk, and call his parents by name. Back at the apartment, the cold, heavy air that had been there before was now overflowing. The sounds of a real home, laughter, warmth, and color. Samuel would run around the living room in the morning, his little feet clicking on the wooden floors. And then he would climb onto a chair to tell Destiny to read him a story, or Matthew to draw a superhero, for Mrs. Lorraine to water the plants. On the patio, the walls of power had come down, and there were framed paintings, taped up art all over, and soft music in their place. Every night, they played while the family ate dinner together. Matthew was once a man who hid behind he stopped to listen, hug his son, and share. He was a hard, uncaring shell. Every little worry or happiness is tied to fate. He started making plans for family picnics, making his own weekend meals, and even baking cookies, though Destiny teased her by laughing as flowers fell all over the floor as she sat down. Matthew learned that happiness isn't about being in charge or staying away from pain. It's about you need to face your heart, open it, and forgive yourself and those you love. He was thankful to Destiny for what she had done to save Samuel and for showing him once more what it means to have hope, forgive, and start over. Lavender flowers covered the market stands one spring afternoon, and Matthew led Destiny and Samuel to a small white church. House in the suburbs to the north, fields of pale purple, and a porch that made you feel welcome. Flower beds and a big garden where Samuel could run around in the sun. After a simple lunch in the flowers, Matthew got down on one knee, pulled out a small ring, and he looked Destiny in the eyes. Bright with happiness and cloudy with tears. "You made this family happy again. Taught me about hope, love, and bravery really are. Dream, will you marry me? Be our mother and Samuel's mother?" Destiny had trouble finding the right words as tears ran down her face. She said yes, and the 3 of them, they hugged each other, and their simple, deep happiness filled the air with warmth. The little house by the lavender fields became Samuel's safe place of love and growth from that day on. As Matthew and Destiny built a new life together and healed old scars, family trips, cozy meals, and mornings full of laughter were all proof of the strength of love that lasts, the hope that never goes out, and the fact that no matter how dark things get, one spark and an open hand can lead us back into the forces, back into light. Matthew and Samuel's story ends with a beautiful, happy ever after. after. It's also a lesson of how powerful hope, strength, and please forgive. It's not always big acts that do wonders. Sometimes it's a child's laugh, the right time to lend a hand, or the guts to make a change. What's most important to you? What a hurt family needs to really get better and be happy again? Share your ideas in the box below. Don't forget to share and like this story. Tell someone you care about, and sign up to make sure you don't miss our next heartwarming story.